rSlashNuclearRevenge, the time I ruined the life of an online troll. Story 1. Let me tell you a story of how I confronted and ultimately ruined the life of an online troll. While it might sound extreme, I firmly believe it was a justified response to the circumstances I found myself in. So I stumbled upon this guy a while back, and I've been sharing my story ever since. I noticed a comment on my article saying that this would be a great spot to share it in. I'm not exactly proud of what I did to this man's life, but I do believe it was justified. Sometimes you've got to fight fire with fire. To truly understand how this all began, we need to rewind to the year that was 2015. Back then, my days were filled with the curious habit of Googling seemingly pointless topics. One day, I embarked on a search for opinions about the meaning of life. I scrolled through endless pages of search results until I stumbled upon the concept of nihilism. Now, what exactly is nihilism? It piqued my interest because it stood in stark contrast to any belief I'd encountered in my quest to grasp the essence of life. In a nutshell, nihilism posits that the world lacks inherent meaning. It's a rather pessimistic perspective on life, suggesting that there's no real purpose to our existence because nothing holds genuine significance. Nihilism can lead individuals to believe that their actions don't even matter, as existence itself is considered irrelevant. Many see nihilism as a brutally realistic belief that challenges our innate human tendency to seek significance and purpose in everything. The need to converse with a real-life nihilist and understand their perspective grew within me, setting the stage for the shocking revelations that lay ahead. Now, this journey led me to explore nihilism on social media platforms, particularly in several Facebook groups dedicated to the topic. These digital communities thrived on dark humor and memes that trivialized life and death. Phrases like existence is misery were commonly tossed around. Amidst these groups, I encountered a few genuine nihilists, but the majority were people grappling with depression or those who found humor in it. Nihilism's doctrine often belittled depression since, in this worldview, nothing truly mattered anyway. This mindset gave rise to dark humor, including dark jokes, which became prevalent in nihilism groups. The constant sharing of such content had a desensitizing effect on members, making them view existence as meaningless, a dangerous thought for those genuinely battling depression. During my exploration, I had a private conversation with an individual who expressed a desire to end their life. Their poignant words were, "The world is not real, but my sadness is," left a lasting impact on me. It became clear to me that nihilism and depression were a perilous mix. I reassured this person of their importance, hoping to provide some solace. Months later, when I attempted to reconnect, I discovered that their Facebook account had vanished. The turning point occurred in mid-2016 when a Facebook notification arrived from one of the nihilist groups. It was a post from someone genuinely seeking advice on peacefully ending their life due to their overwhelming fear. After checking some of the comments on the post, I was horrified to find one person advising them to step in front of an oncoming train. This advisor, little did I know, would become the focal point of my story, a troll whose life I would later impact profoundly. For this narrative, let's call him Nigel to protect his identity. Initially, I dismissed Nigel as merely an edgy provocateur seeking attention. However, my earlier conversation with the individual who vanished from social media returned to haunt me. The possibility that something terrible had occurred was unsettling. I imagined a grim pattern emerging within this group. Driven by a growing unease, I delved into Nigel's posts and comments only to uncover a disturbing trend. He was providing methods for depressed individuals to end their lives, often disguising his guidance as a twisted form of assistance. One particularly disheartened man confessed his recurring failure to end his own life, to which Nigel responded with encouragement, encouraging him to not be too hard on himself. Nigel believed that, with effort, the man could eventually succeed. It became clear that Nigel was no ordinary troll, and action needed to be taken to stop him from causing further harm. I decided to create a fake profile to engage with Nigel with no initial intent to ruin his life, but rather to prevent him from harming others. On this fake profile, I expressed my concerns about the devastating impact of his comments. His response was chillingly indifferent. Unmasking the online troll. From my perspective, Nigel seemed to view depression as a flaw in humanity. It was as though he made it his mission to eradicate what he saw as weakness in our society. His motivation, an obscure and unsettling fascination, was something I couldn't quite comprehend. I decided to issue Nigel a stern warning, making it clear that there would be consequences if he persisted in his harmful actions. To my astonishment, he responded that he didn't care. He promptly blocked my fake profile. Undaunted, I logged into my genuine profile and monitored Nigel's activity closely. To my dismay, within a day, Nigel was back to his old habits, offering sinister advice to yet another soul battling inner demons. Nigel's second warning was in the making. This time, I aimed for a more personal and impactful approach, hoping to instill a sense of fear in him. Within mere minutes, I unearthed Nigel's home address. To make my message even more personal, I penned a handwritten letter and addressed it to his wife. The contents were direct and to the point. Your husband continues to encourage succumbing to mental health struggles online. He provides methods for depressed people, and he must be stopped. Could you please let him know that this is his final warning? I'll be watching. The letter was dispatched with the hope of compelling Nigel to cease his harmful actions. As time passed, I couldn't ignore the growing guilt I felt, knowing that his wife might be living in fear. Initially consumed by my mission to halt Nigel, I now recognize the broader necessity of my actions for the greater good. Time went by and a month elapsed since I had sent the letter. There was an eerie silence from Nigel's end, and for a brief moment I dared to hope that I had made an impact. However, my optimism was short-lived. Another month passed and Nigel resurfaced, resuming his dark deeds. Disheartened but not defeated, I reached out to the depressed victims, reassuring them of my unwavering support. Nigel had to be held accountable for his actions, but the question remained, how? Determined to reveal more about Nigel's life, I delved deeper into his online presence. The internet had laid bare his existence like an open book, and what I discovered left me utterly stunned. Nigel was employed at a reputable care home, where he held a senior position even. This revelation was deeply troubling as it called into question his suitability to even care for vulnerable individuals in society. I knew it was time to deliver the final blow. Nigel's LinkedIn profile disclosed his role as a senior staff member at the care home, a place that valued its reputation. Armed with a trove of screenshots showcasing Nigel's harmful online activity, I contemplated my next move. Ultimately, I decided to contact the care home via their Facebook page using my fake profile through a proxy connection. I believe that Nigel's actions made him unfit to be entrusted with the well-being of others. A member of the care home staff replied, informing me that they had escalated the matter to their CEO. The aftermath. A week later, Nigel was no longer on the company website and had also removed the care home from his LinkedIn page. It was clear that his actions had caused him to lose his job. Nigel's relationship status on Facebook had changed from in a relationship to it's complicated. In almost an instant, he had lost his job and damaged his relationship with his family. Nigel had completely stopped posting on Facebook and eventually shut his Facebook account. This guy's life was turned upside down, and it all stemmed from his actions online. I have comfort in knowing that he will never encourage giving up on life again. Everybody has a right to an opinion, but nobody has the right to prey on the vulnerable. Do I feel guilty? Of course, but then I remember all of those people that he sought to destroy. This man was in a position of care. What if my actions had saved the life of someone? It's these thoughts that make my guilt fade away. You know, this story might not exactly fit the usual nuclear revenge narrative, but it sure packs a punch, especially when you think about the massive havoc this troll wreaked online, specifically targeting folks already battling depression. We've all bumped into internet trolls, right? Some are harmless, just aiming for a bit of sarcastic banter. But when it comes to diving into the dark abyss of trolling already vulnerable folks who are hanging by a thread, that's when it takes a seriously sinister turn, like shoving someone teetering on the edge of a cliff. This troll wasn't satisfied with just cracking dark jokes or light teasing. Oh no, he took it to a whole new level by actively pushing people deeper into their despair, making them feel like there's absolutely no hope left. It's like he turned someone's tragic story into his own messed up comedy show, and that's where he totally crossed the line. It's a misuse of the internet that absolutely needs to be stopped. Now let's talk about our hero in this story. This guy's got heart, you know? His empathy for those who openly share their struggles online is seriously praiseworthy. He stumbled upon this vile troll and decided it was high time to give him a taste of his own medicine. Maybe he saw a glimmer of hope that not everyone out there is inherently wicked, so he took it upon himself to confront the troll and dish out some much-needed payback on behalf of all those who had suffered. The troll may have had a rude awakening, but honestly, it was long overdue. No workplace should tolerate an employee promoting surrendering to grief, and no one should have to deal with someone who shamelessly encourages others to embrace despair at their lowest point. The misery he dished out to those seeking comfort online came back to bite him in real life. He wanted people to lose faith in life, and he got a taste of what it's like to be absolutely miserable. Let's hope he learned a lesson about being responsible for one's actions, especially in the vast realm of the internet. So as we navigate the digital world, let's not forget the profound impact our words can have on those who might be struggling. It's crucial to use our online presence wisely and with kindness, spreading positivity and offering support instead of causing harm. If you ever encounter a troll like the one in this story, remember it's perfectly fine to stand up against their actions, just like our hero did here. Together we can make the internet a safer and more empathetic place for everyone.
Shh, here's a little secret for you. This video is sponsored by none other than me and my team at Rufus Rugs. We're the masters of creating custom, hand-tufted rugs that capture who you truly are. Whether you want to transform one of our intriguing thumbnails into a rug, for a friend, obviously, or you're craving a room makeover with awesome anime-inspired designs, we've got your back. Oh, and did I mention, each and every rug is skillfully handcrafted by me and my friends. No BS dropshipping gimmick here. You'll be blown away by your rug. Hit the first link in the description to learn more.
Story 2. Why don't we see Uncle Mark anymore? So this story comes from a conversation I had with my dad over a drink not too long ago. He had a few too many, and that's when he decided to share this with me. He said it's been long enough and he's faced the consequences, so there's nothing to hold back anymore. That's the only reason I'm posting this now. Uncle Mark was hands down my favorite uncle when I was a kid. He'd often invite me over to show off his airsoft gun collection, throw epic hide-and-seek parties with my friends, and even take us to the beach. He was the coolest. He'd always bring us sweets and blended right in with us kids, just another big kid who loved having a good time. But then came the day when I, a mere 7-year-old, was all set to visit because Uncle Mark had promised to take us to this amazing place. My dad was in unusually high spirits that day. He couldn't stop talking about how much he loved the fact that his brother wanted to be a part of his children's lives. Until he got a phone call. I was in my room packing my stuff when suddenly the most spine-chilling scream echoed through the house. My dad was yelling and furious. I heard him slam open the front door and then slam it shut so hard that a picture hanging nearby fell off the wall. I didn't see my dad for a long time after that. He never told me why until our recent talk, but I'll get to that part in a bit. Mom had some money saved up from a minor lotto win, so we managed fine. She always smiled and told me, "Daddy is away for a little while because he's taking care of me and my siblings," whenever I asked where he was. Uncle Mark didn't come around during this time either, but we did spot him in town a couple of times. Strangely enough, he'd bolt the moment my mom spotted me waving at him. 9 months later, Dad returned and I couldn't have been happier. I ran to hug him and he hugged me back tightly. We threw a party to celebrate his return, complete with party food and cake. I was just thrilled that my dad was back. A week or so later, Dad gathered us kids and explained that Uncle Mark wouldn't be visiting us anymore. When we asked why, he simply said Uncle Mark was a bad person, and that if he ever tried to talk to us, we were to ignore him and find one of them instead. We all agreed because, well, Dad always knew what was best. Then one day, when I was about 9 years old, I was waiting outside school for my parents to pick me up. My other siblings were either in secondary school or too young for school, so it was just me. I saw Uncle Mark standing there with a big grin. I got nervous as he approached me and told me I wasn't supposed to talk to him, that my dad had said he was a bad person. Uncle Mark's expression suddenly turned scary for a moment, but then he reassured me that everything was okay, and my parents had changed their minds. He even reached out to take my hand. That's when my dad appeared out of nowhere. He punched Uncle Mark right in the face, and I saw Uncle Mark fall to the ground. I didn't witness much after that except Uncle Mark scrambling to get away with my dad hot on his heels. Dad came back after a little while, sighed, and hugged me. He told my mom to take me home and that he'd see us later. I don't know why, but I could sense right then and there that it would be a long time before I ever saw my dad again. Turns out I was right. It took 5 years. For 5 long years, my dad was absent from our lives. Eventually, my mom decided to share the truth with us. He had been in prison, all to protect us. We all suspected it had something to do with Uncle Mark, and we were right. It turned out that Uncle Mark had a dark secret. He had a twisted fondness for children, and that fateful day when I was meant to visit his house, my aunt, Uncle Mark's wife, had made a horrifying discovery. She found disturbing pictures under their bed. Terrified and herself, she was too afraid to involve the police, fearing Mark's retaliation. That's when my dad received a frantic call from her. In a furious rage, my dad rushed over to their house. He kicked down the door and was met with the sight of Uncle Mark screaming at my aunt, who was waving those dreadful pictures in sheer hysteria. My dad, driven by a protective instinct, unleashed a furious beating upon Uncle Mark. The latter threatened my dad, vowing revenge as the police arrived and arrested my father. However, Mark managed to burn the incriminating evidence and coerced his wife into silence, leaving my dad behind bars. But Mark was patient. He waited until my dad thought we were safe. Then, as my dad recounted, he tried to me from school right under everyone's noses. People didn't believe my dad's warnings about Mark being a predator. They thought it was just an excuse earlier. After all, the police found no evidence, and Mark's wife accused my dad of lying. My dad, a big burly guy with a history of violence, was an easy target for suspicion. So all they saw was a friendly uncle picking me up from school. Uncle Mark managed to escape my dad at the school. My dad tripped, giving Mark a chance to run. But my dad knew where he would go. He knew Mark would run home to destroy any remaining evidence. My dad had his car. Uncle Mark was on foot. So he drove over and confronted my aunt, demanding to know if she would lie again after what Mark had just attempted. My aunt at that moment realized the monstrous truth about her husband. She vowed not to protect Mark this time. My dad instructed her to gather evidence while he waited for Mark. She returned with a trove of incriminating pictures. My dad ordered her to leave, wait for an hour, and then call the police. He was going to put an end to this nightmare. As Uncle Mark appeared, my dad, hidden behind the wall of Mark's garden, thrust him through the door of his house. What followed was a brutal altercation between my dad and Uncle Mark in his doorway. The floor was so red. My dad didn't resist when he was arrested for He only expressed regret that someone else hadn't taken care of the problem. However, when it was revealed that Uncle Mark was indeed a predator who had tried to me, and the truth of how they had allowed a predator to roam free sunk in, my dad's charges were reduced to manslaughter. His lawyer argued that my father had acted in a protective rage, intending only to render Mark harmless. Strangely, no one defended the predator. My dad said he didn't regret his actions, but he wished he had handled it differently so that he wouldn't have missed so much of my life. I reassured him that I would forever be proud of him and that I loved him deeply. I couldn't help but wonder why I wasn't told the truth about Uncle Mark for so long. My dad asked if knowing the reality as a child would have made it any easier to bear. He was right. The child in me wouldn't have been able to handle it. Truthfully, I'm still struggling to come to terms with it as an adult. Uncle Mark was a predator, and my dad took drastic measures to protect our family. Uncle Mark tried to me, but my dad confronted me and ultimately ended him. Talk about quick vigilante-style revenge. We've got ourselves a seriously intense family drama right here. Just picture having a family member who's not just a troublemaker, but a full-blown criminal, and to top it off, one who preys on innocent kids. I mean, who wants that kind of person at family gatherings or, honestly, in their lives, right? It's like stumbling upon a psycho right in your own backyard. But before we jump to conclusions about the dad and his hardcore actions, let's try to get where he was coming from. He must have hit rock bottom, feeling like the only way out was to take matters into his own hands. And honestly, who could blame him? The dad was probably sick and tired of the whole get away with everything vibe, especially with the crazy uncle pulling some seriously shady moves to cover his tracks. In the dad's shoes, he felt he had to protect his family and serve up some swift justice for those innocent kids. Just try stepping into his shoes for a second. Can you even see that despicable criminal as family? I seriously doubt it. So let's make one thing clear. Kids is just plain savage and inhumane. It's like leaving a permanent scar on those youngsters' innocence, all to satisfy someone's twisted desires. Now, sure, there might have been other ways to handle the uncle's crimes, like, taking the whole mess to the authorities and making sure that predator uncle got locked away for life. We've got laws to protect kids after all. The dad could have spared himself a trip behind bars and stayed with his family. But taking justice into your own hands comes with its own set of consequences. However, it seems like the dad had a major falling out with the legal system, facing charges for his actions fueled by his intense dislike for his brother, especially after learning about the latter's monstrous acts. Maybe it shows that many families are still figuring out how to handle these kinds of conflicts internally. It also highlights the need for law enforcement in various communities to step up and protect children's rights. So here's hoping this story serves as a wake-up call, reminding us to revamp efforts to protect children's rights and not let a culture of having crimes left unpunished thrive, even within our own family circles. Let's also hope that the person who shared this story can find a way to heal from those tough times. If you enjoy these stories, then please do go ahead and watch Boss's Boss Threatens to Fire Me. I Accept and Get Himself and His Friends Fired. Story 2 had me going, sheesh. I'll catch you later in that one.